Hello and welcome back to A Splash of Paint. Now it's time to enjoy one of the many professional SAA artists who is causing a creative stir. So sit back and admire the loose and fluid style of versatile acrylic artist Terry Chipp, as he demonstrates how this dynamic and colourful medium can be used to create a captivating beach scene.
Now today I'm going to paint what I call a wet beach scene. The inspiration for this was a photograph I took from across Scarborough North Bay, and the sunlight was glistening off the wet beach. There were lots of figures about, and I really thought there was a picture in there somewhere. I wasn't sure where, so I just took a general photograph. This is the original photograph here, and towards the right here there's a little group of 3 figures which I thought looked interesting. So with the wonders of digital technology, I was able to blow this up on my computer, isolate those 3 figures, and I thought, well, there's the making of a picture. There are some bits that don't quite work. There are vertical stripes running downwards, which are the reflections of a building that is now out of shot. So, for the purpose of this painting, I'm going to totally ignore those stripes. Also, just for a bit of interest, I'm going to change the horizon, because on this picture, this photograph as I have it, there's no horizon. I want to give these people something to walk towards. So I've borrowed the figures from the picture, I've borrowed the wet beach. Beyond that, I'm making my own design, my own composition. Right, so here's the design on the canvas. The canvas has already been prepared by using the moulding paste, which gives a nice crisp texture, applied with quite liberally with a broad palette knife. And when I've applied that to the canvas, I've done it quite thinly at the top, and gradually as it's come towards us, to get more interest in it, it's been thicker, dragged more layers, so it's quite crusty at the bottom. This gives an impression of depth just in the texture of the design. You can see I've put in this cliff for the people to walk towards. People who know Scarborough will recognise the outcrop for Primrose Valley Caravan site. The next job is just to get some colour on this, and let's see what these textures do for us. They will do a job, particularly later on in the painting. To begin with, I want to get the paint on using a kitchen roll, much quicker than a brush. And first of all, I'm going to damp the canvas all over, just to make sure that when I put the paint on, I can blend it and slide it around without it binding into the textures that I've put on there. So wetting the whole canvas again. And one point I forgot to mention was that when I put the gesso or the moulding paste all over the canvas, I then redrew my design into that so that the drawing is actually embossed into the surface that I'm going to paint on. This is very useful when I come to put the paint on quite broadly, because without that there's a danger I could lose the picture altogether. Right, so that's, I think, wet enough all over. So I'm using a very limited palette today. I've just got cobalt blue, cerulean blue, burnt sienna, yellow ochre and white. Lots of white, because the sunlight was dazzling off that beach, so there's going to be a lot of white reflections to come later on. But to begin with, we're going to start with the blue. I'm using a cobalt blue for the distance with lots of white to it. Now I'm going to start at the top and work my way down. So smearing that on, mixing the colour on the canvas, and long horizontal strokes. I've gone straight over the cliffs here, it doesn't matter, I'll bring those back later. And while I've got that colour going, I'm going to bring it right down, because that same colour will be reflected in the sea down below. Make sure you get to the edges. And then I'm going to start coming in with, still with the cobalt and white, but also with a little bit of cerulean now, just to make a slight change in the colouring. Straight over the figures. This is just to give me a general background to work against. More of the cerulean now, a little bit richer as we come closer. All this can be balanced up later on. And now we're going quite strongly with it. And this intensifying the colour as we come forward, again, helps to create a sense of depth. So that's got rid of the white canvas. The next issue is that obviously I don't want it all just that blue. For the sea in this area, I want that sea to not be as blue as the sky. So what I'm going to do is to pick up plenty of white, a little bit of blue, and this time just a small smudge of the burnt sienna. And that will neutralise the blue. I'll have to rub it well in. I have to rub that well in to get a grey. I like the combination of blue and grey. And that gives quite a cold, distant look to the sea that warms up as I come down. It's perhaps gone a little bit too round there, so I'll lighten it up just a little. There. Now, as we come closer in here, we're going to start seeing the sand coming through, so I'm going to pick up some yellow ochre, still keeping quite a bit of white in there, and put a few stripes of sandy colours. This is just banding it. It's going to be a bit of a nuisance if I don't take it out. More warmth down towards the bottom here. And a little bit more sand in the distance over here, as though there's a beach coming around this edge of the bottom of the cliff. And keep it very smooth in the distance. We can get lumpier near towards the foreground. Right. Next, I want to put in a little bit more colour and texture to this foreground here. I'm going to use more of the burnt sienna and a little more of the blue, just to sort of drag lightly across here, just to add a little bit more strength and interest, as though there are little bits of rock, debris in the sand. It's just picking up on those peaks that I put on with the gesso. A little bit on there. I'm keeping it very much to this side, to the right-hand side there for the moment, and then we start to spread out a little bit further as we come lower down. It's bringing warmth to the foreground, cooler work to the background. And then before I go much further, I want to bring some light into it as well in the distance there. So more light over this area. It's really just mixing the colours on the canvas, trying to get a general balance in place before we start worrying about the details. And lighten the sky a little as well. Right, so I think that is probably as far as I would want to go at this stage. So join me later on in the programme when we'll finish this painting off and actually get some brushes out.
Stunning techniques there, and we'll rejoin Terry later in the programme as he adds the final finishing touches to today's painting project. Now it's time for our regular My Favourite feature, where we ask popular artists to reveal some of the many things that inspire them. This week, we talk to up-and-coming artist Marion Dutton.
I love orange. Orange is the colour of sunsets. It's also the colour that you see in autumn leaves, two of my favourite things to look at and be inspired by. One of the favourite colour mixes I use is burnt sienna, ultramarine blue and white, and this makes an absolutely beautiful grey, and I use that to tone down a lot of the colours. I'll add this to, say, reds and pinks, and it tones them down, giving you a much more natural and much more subdued colour. Without a doubt, oils. I love acrylics. Fast drying properties of acrylics are really exciting, but the creaminess of oils, the blending, the opening times, without a doubt, for me, is unbeatable. I love painting on stretch canvases, and I also love painting on canvas boards.
Well, it's time for a short break now, folks, but join us in part 3 when we'll find out a little bit more about Marianne and take a look at her in action. See you after the break.